Welcome back to the workshop and to the channel. I think we're about 95% of the way there in completing this reconstruction of the steady rest for my South Bend lathe. So far I have machined the 3 adjustment screws as well as the adjustment knobs. I've also gone ahead and cleaned up the jaws themselves and the sleeves that the jaws run in. I also did the machining on the bed clamp. We're almost there for final assembly. The next thing I need to do is pin these adjustment screws to the knobs. I'm going to use a number 1 taper pin, so I need to drill a through hole and then ream it for the taper in the end of each of the knobs. These aren't a press fit or anything, so I want to make sure that these screws don't move while I'm drilling them. So I'm using some Loctite 638, just some retaining compound to more or less glue them in place while I put them in the mill and drill the hole. With the retaining compound setting, I'm placing the knob here into the mill vise with a V-block. To make sure that I don't damage any of the knurling, I'm placing some cardboard around the knob that should protect that knurling but still give me adequate clamping force on the knob itself. I found it interesting that the V-block rose up on the fixed jaw as I clamped it. I think that's because of the way that that particular V profile was cut. I'm going to rotate it to a different position and see if I can minimize that. I don't think it raising up like that is really a problem. It's just kind of self-centering on the knob, trying to find its happy medium, I guess. There's still plenty of clamping force between the knob. The V-block against the fixed jaw is still flat, so I don't really have any reservations about the work holding here. With the knob clamped securely in place, I'll use my Starrett edge finder and a drill chuck to find the top of the knob as well as its center. Before drilling the through hole, I'll use a spotting bit first. I've swapped out the spotting bit with a drill bit that is slightly smaller than the smallest end of the taper pin. I'll use a tapered reamer to get it to the proper diameter. I've swapped out now to a 1/8 inch drill bit for the hole for the retention shoe, I'm calling it, that is placed in the groove near the bottom of the knob. No real room here for a spotting bit. I suppose I could have used a center bit, but I think if I take this nice and slow, I should be able to drill this straight. Next, I need to ream the hole out to fit the number 1 taper pin. This is actually a number 0 tapered reamer, so I'm going to end up running this almost all the way to the top of the reamer before I get enough room to insert the pin. We'll take the reamer out here and do a quick test fit with this number 1 pin. I should be really close, and I am. I think I just need to take a little bit more off, and the pin should come all the way through the knob. Let's try this again, and I think I'm at the point where I like it. It doesn't have too much further to go with just finger pressure, but if I take a hammer and finish it all the way through, we should have a good fit. Well, I can't leave these pins long, so what I'm going to do now here is take my Dremel with a cutoff wheel. I'll trim them as close as I can get to the knob without scratching the surface of the knob. Using a gray fabric abrasive wheel, these are kind of like Scotch-Brite wheels, I can go ahead and smooth over the end of the taper pins and blend them a little bit better into the finish of the knob. I think now we're ready to reassemble this steady rest for the last time. The first thing I need to do is insert these adjusting sleeves into the cast body and then pin them in place. I tried to clean off any burrs the best I could, but I didn't want to end up taking off too much material and cause the sleeve to be too loose of a fit in the steady rest. The sleeve is held in place with another taper pin, although these are very short. It's only maybe 3/8 of an inch long. I do need to make sure that I don't overdrive this pin and it ends up protruding through the interior of the sleeve. With that sleeve pinned in place, I'll turn it over here. I want to start assembling the knob. The first thing I need to put on is this ring, and it's just going to sit loosely over the threads of the sleeve for a minute. Well, before I put this knob together, I want to put a little bit of grease on the adjusting screw. This is probably unnecessary just because this is being screwed into a piece of brass. But since I won't be able to put any oil in this or anything later, I figured a tiny bit of grease here may save me some headache down the road. Now I want to insert the jaw onto the adjusting screw and thread it all the way down to the bottom. This would be in the jaw's fully retracted position. The next thing I want to install is this jaw key. It is essentially it's round, but on one end of it the edges have been milled away, so they're flat and they ride in this slot on the jaw. I want to make sure there's no other burrs on this slot so that it will slide over that key freely. That key is inserted into this threaded hole on the front of the steady rest that also the thumb screws thread into. The flats on that key need to be oriented so that they run parallel with the jaws and the sleeve. So when I insert the jaw, it can slide over top of it. I just need to insert the jaw and the knob down over top of that keyway, and I can start threading the knob onto the adjustment sleeve. With the knob partially threaded onto the sleeve, I can now insert this brass shoe into that hole that we drilled in the groove on the side of the knob. And now that ring comes into play. With that brass shoe in the hole, I can take this ring and expand it a bit, get it over at the end of the knob, and it will then snap into that groove. And I believe that the purpose of that shoe then is to provide just a little bit of tension on the threads with the knob so that it can't vibrate loose even if it's not tightened down. Well, with the knobs all installed, the jaws that is, all installed, I can put the top half of the steady rest back on and finish this assembly. Originally, when I removed this hinge pin, the ends of it were deformed to keep it from loosening and coming out. I think what I would rather do is use some more of this Loctite 638 on just the very end of this pin, so it's retained into the bottom half, but the top half is still free to rotate around it. The next thing I can put back on here is the lock bolt. When I got this steady rest, this lock bolt was held in place with a roll pin, which I know was not original. So I had some 3/16 inch drill rod. I went ahead and cut a piece down to size, and we'll use that instead. And just like we did for the hinge pin, I'm going to use a little bit of Loctite on this dowel. Off camera, I made this 5/8 inch shoulder bolt, as well as this washer and this hex nut that we'll use to secure it to the bed of the lathe. Well, let's give the steady rest a test run. I've got a piece of bar stock chucked up in the lathe. Well, the first thing I need to do is machine a flat spot for the steady rest jaws. With the steady rest open, I can bring it up underneath this bar stock and set it on the bedway. And this is where I discovered that I screwed up on the bed clamp. The bed clamp, I can't rotate it. I can't rotate it with it in between the bedways. It's square on the ends, which prohibits it from turning without me removing it first and sliding it down to pull it back up. So that's something that I'll need to fix. Well, with the jaws loosely set, I'll put some oil here on the flat, and I can then slowly adjust each of the jaws until they are right barely touching the rotating stock. Well, of course, now with the steady rest in place, I should have no trouble making any kind of significant cuts on this longer piece of stock. The only thing I'm not really 100% sure of here is the jaws. The concavity of the end of the jaws is not symmetrical. Only a piece of each one of the jaws is actually making contact or close contact with the stock. And I'm not sure if that's something that I need to fix or if I just let them wear their way in naturally over time. But I am happy with this so far. I think it will definitely come in handy for an upcoming job. But I actually have a job for this steady rest that doesn't require any cutting tools at all. So if you're intrigued by that and interested in finding out what that job could be, I would appreciate if you hit that subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you'll be notified when I do finally post that video. Well, this project is complete, and I couldn't be happier with the results, except for that issue I had with the bed clamp. I'll have to put that back on the rotary table on the mill and round over each end of that bed clamp, but that's going to probably have to wait for another day.